Miss Zulaikha Patel, thank you so much for joining us on Dope Conversations.
Thank you for having me.
I'm slightly intimidated because you're so ladylike, but I hope I'll try to adjust. Need to give a shout out because you said this before we started rolling. Shout out to your dad on ensuring that you are the lady that you are today, and I hope you'll tell us about him as well. We don't have much time, unfortunately, but I would like you, if possible, to come back, and then we can have 2-3 hours if you want to speak about anything that you want comfortably. If you don't mind, I know I asked to read something on Wikipedia and you're like, they kind of messed up my birth date. But I'm hoping I can read this because this is how I want us to start the conversation. Is that fine?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Zulaikha Patel, born, is a South African anti-racism activist. She became a symbol of the fight against Pretoria Girls High School's policy regarding black girls' hair in 2016 at the age of 13. You were 13?
Yes, turning 14.
Oh, in grade 8. You feisty grade 8.
Not feisty. I just knew what was right and I knew what was wrong.
Okay. She and her classmates held a demonstration that led to not only a change in school policy, but also an inquiry into allegations of racism at the school. She is quoted as saying, "Asking me to change my hair is like asking me to erase my blackness." You still stand by that?
Yes, I do.
Including the blackness?
Yes.
You believe you are black?
I've got blackness in me. My mother is black. My mother's Ndebele. And the reason why my hair looks the way it looks is because of my identity. Blackness forms a part of my identity.
Yeah.
And asking me to change my hair is asking me to erase the blackness that exists in me. And you primarily have a problem with me because of the blackness that exists within me. You wouldn't have a problem if I was just an Indian girl with straight hair that everyone admires, everyone wants a piece of for a weave. You have a problem because my hair curls the way it curls, and it curls the way it curls because of the blackness that exists in my identity. And that is why you have a problem with me, and that is why you want me to assimilate to something I'm not. So I stand by that fully. I said that 8 years ago and I still stand by it.
Yeah. It's a lot. And, I'm triggered because of what you're saying about my hair is my identity. Because today, and for the longest time now, a lot of black women, without provocation, are comfortable to remove their hair and to wear other people's hair, which almost now makes you question if they are comfortable with their own personal identity.
Look, I mean, as a society, looking at how we've developed over the years and what kind of influences we have, because people follow societal influences and influences they're getting from public figures or what is in the media and what is being portrayed in the media. If you look at the period because we went from the 70s during black consciousness in South Africa, black power in America, where afros were a symbol of freedom and it was a symbol of pride when you wore your hair naturally. Yeah. Then we moved to the 80s where that began to fall away a bit. And in the early 90s, the relaxers then gained prominence, and that's when a lot of your businesses that were in the business of making relaxers began to boom, and we're getting lots of business. And then we then started to move to sew-ins in the early 2000s, and then we found ourselves by weaves, and then now wigs.
Yeah.
And if you look at what is in the media and what is influencing people and what people are being told is desirable in the media, that is what that's how women are being socialized right now. And that's why they're following what is being portrayed in the media, what they're being told is desirable right now. And as it stands right now, it's more popular to have and forgive me if I make a mistake, I'm not too privy about wigs and the correct terms, but a lace frontal, I believe that's what it's called. It's more the in thing now to have a lace frontal. And that's what's being shown in the media, on every magazine cover or in every music video. And this is also what popular influencers, where people draw their inspiration in terms of how they want to look, are also wearing. And so that is what they think is desirable. And that culture has kind of basically taken over society currently. So I also don't think it's a matter of comfort with their identity, but it's also a matter of how we've shifted and what are the influences in our current society.
Yeah, thank you. I'm triggered, but I would need to finish reading this thing. Should I detour? No, let me not. Let me stay focused, Penzo. The issue in Pretoria Girls High School.
Why are you laughing?
Oh no, these are really good schools, man, and they really try their best. It's just when they make it to the media, I know how much they cringe. Because like, oh my gosh, it was a long time ago and we've changed the policy. Pretoria Girls High School is located in Pretoria. The school was founded in 1902 and was all white since founding until 1990, as South African schools were segregated before apartheid. But since 1990, the school is open to all races. According to CNN, Pretoria Girls Code of Conduct does not specifically mention afros, but it does lay out rules for general appearance, including prescribing that all styles should be conservative, neat, and in keeping with the school uniform. Teachers had told the students that their afro hair is exotic and needed to be tamed. It was implied that girls' hair needed to be straightened or tied back, not worn as afros. Zulaikha Patel was among the students who led a demonstration against Pretoria Girls High against the all-girls schools hair policy. The demonstrating teenagers were threatened with arrest as Zulaikha Patel led the silent protest. A video posted online showed Zulaikha Patel as she faced 3 armed security guards who were hired by the school management to break up the demonstration. This video caused a large backlash against the school. The comparison between yourself, because I know this came, I know it'll probably always be there. Hector Peterson, June 76. Do you see a parallel? Do you identify it all in that? You're like, I think what we were doing was completely different. I don't think this was young people rising up for what they were rising up, and or do you see similarities?
Allow me to paraphrase Frantz Fanon's words, where he says something along the lines of every generation has its own mission to fulfill. If you look at what was at the core of what the class of 76 was demanding, was education to be decolonized. Because outside of them protesting against the medium of instruction becoming Afrikaans, they were demanding an end to the system of Bantu education, which was a system that was put in place to make a black child inferior through the kind of education they received and the quality of the education, as well as what was portrayed within what they were being taught. They were being taught to glorify colonization and colonizers, and they weren't being taught anything about themselves, right? So I've always been a lover of history, and so I've done quite a bit of research around this. And I remember there's an interview of someone actually saying where they were learning about the Napoleon War and they also wanted more about Africa to be documented. So at the core of their mission was really decolonization of education. And the reason why I say I do see similarity within what the fight I was part of and their fight is because it's almost like that mission has fallen onto another generation, because that system itself that creates these environments that are oppressive and make people inferior still exists, even though it's not loud and constitutionalized like the system they fought. However, its remnants still exists, which is why I exist, which is why the movement I formed part of exists, which is why Fees Must Fall also existed, because those remnants are still there. And so there are similarities between our fight, Fees Must Fall, and the class of 76, because we all draw from one core in terms of what we're demanding. At the core of all our mission is to decolonize education and make the spaces more inclusive.
Yeah. You think the fight will ever end? Realistically?
I've been
I know
asked
it's an unfair
this
question.
before, if I think the fight will ever end. Look, right now, we have a government that looks like us, right?
Sure.
We don't have a white oppressive government where the laws of apartheid are constitutionalized. We've got a government that looks like us, and apartheid is no longer constitutionalized. But then with that, having a government that also looks like us and isn't also prioritizing really not non-racialism and reform, a little bit of reform here and there, but really prioritizes completely eradicating and annihilating the system that was built by apartheid and what apartheid did to South Africa as a country in terms of geospatially, as well as how it's influenced institutions and how policies are also drawn up. If we have a government that really prioritized that and made it their mission to completely annihilate that system, then it would have ended a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's also about what are the priorities of government and also what was negotiated in Cadesa, because no one is aware of what was negotiated in Cadesa. There are no minutes of that meeting that exist.
Yeah.
And it's really just about knowing what are the priorities of government. So I also think that if we also have a different government that's younger and is more energetic and really is more uncomfortable with the way South African society looks, we're able to change that, because the only thing holding us back from changing that, because I'm going to give you an example of one small thing that the government we have was tasked with was improving the living standard of the black majority. If you look at certain very remote rural areas that become your forgotten places in the country, there are schools there that still use pit toilets.
Yeah.
That's a very simple thing to change. You could have given yourself a 10-year period to make sure no child in this country is subjected to a pit toilet.
Yeah.
But it's about priority, and it's about how you're directing the funds and what is really at the core of what you want to do as a government.
Let me finish this so we can chat properly. The aftermath of Zulaikha's protest. Zulaikha Patel's actions inspired other protests in South Africa at Lawson Brown High School in the Eastern Cape and St. Michael's School for Girls in Bloemfontein, where parents marched as well. People worldwide began sharing pictures of their own afros on social media in solidarity with the female students of Pretoria High School. International press coverage ensued. The protest showed that racial divisions persist despite the 1991 end of apartheid. Patel's defiance initiated more protests and change. Gauteng Education MEC Panyaza Lesufi visited Pretoria Girls High School to hear the black students' grievances, not only about the hair policy but about racism in general at the school. For example, girls are not permitted to speak African languages on the school premises, only English and Afrikaans. Patrick Gaspard, US Ambassador to South Africa, tweeted, "All societies have rules, and sometimes those rules are biased and need to be exposed and protested." An online petition had almost 25,000 signatures within a day. The Gauteng Department of Education suspended the hair policy. Zulaikha was recognized as one of the BBC's 100 Women of 2016. And before we chat properly, I just want to say on behalf of every young girl in this country that may not know at all, I just want to say thank you. I'm a father of 3 daughters. I understand the dynamics of our history and all these things, and it takes some of these efforts for your children to feel part of something. And it's to you, it's to the girls that were marching at Pretoria Girls, it's to the girls that were marching at other schools, it's to all the parents that were involved. Inclusivity is I've come to realize, very polarizing, because there are actually people that are very uncomfortable with inclusivity and they fight it in America and other parts of the world. And to be able to see girls comfortably be themselves, that's part of the work you've done as a 13-year-old turning 14. So just on behalf of them, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. I think you saw your fans outside. They were like, oh my gosh, you've grown up so much. So thank you. A step back, your parents, your mixed race, you said your mom is Ndebele, and we touched on your dad.
Yes, my mother is Ndebele. She's from KwaMhlanga in Mpumalanga, and my father is Indian and Muslim. He's from a small village in India called Karmad.
Yeah.
It's mainly a Muslim region. He came to South Africa in the late 70s.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then he met this Ndebele, and then he was like, oh yes, I'm going in. I'm going in. Just a quick, your upbringing, how was that like for you? We speak about Trevor Noah and Born a Crime. I've spoken to Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, whose mom is a British white woman and his father is senior advocate Dali Mpofu, black Xhosa man. I've got Shoma Josie. I sat with a gentleman, Warwick Stock, DJ Waras, also mixed race. We've got a lot. I don't know if you know their stories. I don't know if your upbringing was any different, the same, etc.
I'm not aware of what their stories were, but I do know some of them. My upbringing, part of the reason why I became the person I am and why I'm committed and relentless in the pursuit of justice and human rights, and particularly anti-racism, is because I experienced my first form of racism as being rejected by my paternal family. I've never been accepted by my paternal family, neither have I been seen as part of my paternal family. My first form of racism was being told that I've ruined the bloodline of my paternal family.
To this day.
And this happened in my early childhood. So part of the reason why my dad also left is because he came from a very conservative, small Muslim Indian community where they still believed in arranged marriages, where people would meet on the day of their wedding.
Yeah.
It would just be images are shared with the family. Here's the girl, here's the guy. You meet at your wedding, right? They still believed in arranged marriages. They still believed that women are not meant to be educated. Women are not meant to have a voice. Women are meant to be subjected to arranged marriages, and then you are meant to be silent in the household and completely be invisible, right? And other than those beliefs, they also had very conservative beliefs that you can't be with someone outside of your race or your religion. Like you can't be with a Hindu person, for example, where that's a pretty big population in India, right? You can't be with a Hindu person. You have to be married within the mosque and within the community of the mosque. And those were the beliefs. And you can't also become too westernized, as they would say it. My dad's form of education was he went to madrasa, where it's a system of education where you learn according to the Islamic religion and you learn based on the Quran. You learn Arabic in terms of how to read the Quran, and you learn according to the values of the Quran, right? No exposure whatsoever to the rest of the world, right? And I'm not saying madrasa is wrong. I'm also a product of madrasa, but as a part-time side thing, not as full-time, and I've got no exposure to the rest of the world. So that's the kind of community my dad came from. And that was why he left as well, because he didn't want to be part of that. So he left. And that was still how my paternal family was up until I was born. And it just also became worse when I came into the mix, because it was like, oh, you have a relationship with a black person. Now you have the audacity to even have a child. And now your child looks the way they look. You have so much audacity, right? So that's a bit of my upbringing. So with my upbringing, I never in even my wildest imagination did I think I would be even a small fraction of the person I am now, because I was always someone that was behind the scenes, in the background, easily invisible, never had much of a voice. Absolutely.
This was based on your upbringing?
Said nothing at all. Only spoke when spoken to. I remember my dad and I used to fight a lot, because he would actually fight with me around, if you don't like something, why are you quiet about it? Why are you saying, yes, I'm fine, yes, it's okay? Why are you saying that? You need to say if you don't like something, right? Like he would actually fight me, as in, why are you saying you're fine and you're not fine? Or it's okay and you're not okay? So for the longest time, my dad and I fought about that when I was growing up.
He wanted you to have a voice?
Yes, because I never said anything ever. And I never even spoke much about myself. I was just those kids that you only ever knew of when you needed homework or assistance. And then you only see them pop up once a year when academic awards are being handed out. Other than that, they're invisible.
You're a cute little nerd. Thank you. Shout out to all the cute little nerds. We do appreciate you. Some of you see you. Some of us see you. Not just for homework. But shout out to you.
So, yeah, I was completely invisible throughout the whole year. And I never said much. And I always got made fun of as well, which for me, was one of the things that is the core of what has made my activism career, because I experienced being an outcast because I came from an interfaith and an interracial family. I was an outcast everywhere. At the mosque, I was an outcast. Oh my word, I was such an outcast. I was an outcast because why is it that when you wear a hijab, it's not completely flat on your head? There's like a hump at the back because of your hair. Things like that, or the curls of your hair are peeking out. I was an outcast sometimes on my maternal side because you are the light-skinned one, you are the privileged one, and I'm not denying the existence of colorism, by the way, but I became an outcast ultimately because of how I look, right? And paternal side, rejected, never even made it to becoming an outcast. Amongst children around me, I was an outcast. So I saw and understood what the reality of our country was from a very young age. I knew that we do not live in some glamorous world where when Nelson Mandela put his fist up at the Union buildings, racism was somewhat buried. No, just because it's not constitutionalized, that doesn't mean it's not institutionalized within the institutions, and it's not systemic in our influenced how our economy is, where a tiny minority of this country runs the wealth of the country, right? And owns most of the land in this country. I got to understand that based on how I was treated. I saw from how I was treated. I saw from my moments of silence. I was able to analyze how things are playing out around me, because I developed and matured mentally very early. So I had the vocabulary for things quite early in life. I just never spoke. I understood what was happening around me. I knew how to identify racism. I knew how to identify sexism. I knew all these things, and I would see it happen as I'm being outcasted and I'm quiet, and I would analyze and watch. So I understood the reality of the country very early in life, and I knew what's in the PR and media about South Africa is not the reality that South Africans live through at all.
Yeah. I'm trying to bite my tongue to not share my story, but we're having a conversation and it's important, and maybe it'll also form a backdrop for our next sit down. My mother is mixed race. Her father was an Indian Muslim man, Hussein Chota Amin from Pietermaritzburg. Her mom, a black Zulu woman. The number of stories she's told us about being an outcast, of which you don't know that mixed race kids, light-skinned kids, can be outcast in black communities back then. The second thing being, I've tried and kind of struggled somewhat to find access to my mom's father's side of the family. And I remember watching a reality TV show where there was a mixed race lady. And one of the things that came out, because she was looking for her father and he was refusing to meet her. There are a lot of mixed race kids. Of course, we've got the colored community, which comes from the Dutch or the Afrikaners, maybe some British people, sleeping with, arguably raping some of the black women in the Western Cape, Eastern Cape side. We don't speak much about some of the other mixed races that we get. And what came out in that show was there are a lot of mixed race kids that come from Indian Muslim men. And for all the reasons you mentioned, a lot of those kids are never accepted. And you wonder if the men themselves were aware of what they were doing so that they can take ownership. This is my child. I don't care who disapproves. This is my child. This is my choice. Or if they also form part of turning you away. It's like, did you really love my mom? What? I've struggled to gain access to my mother's father's side of the family. My mom says her father loved her. And we're going to have to, at some point, need to have a very difficult conversation. We can have it with white people, those who are willing to acknowledge. But we also need to have it with the Indian Muslim community in particular, because it is a very conservative community. Yes, they're very disciplined in their religion but there are a lot of mixed race kids that come from these men. And the men need to speak up about it and be honest. Did you do something wrong? Were you sinning? Or is this something you wanted? If you were sinning, what does that mean? Because there's a child now here.
It's got nothing to do with that. No. You know, the reason why I'm saying no is because I have read the Quran. I have studied the Quran. Like I said, I am a product of madrasa, right? Shout out to the imam that taught me the Quran. But I refuse to accept any narrative around was this sinning, was it haram? I refuse because none of that is in the Quran itself. And I refuse for religion to be used in that light, especially a religion like Islam. I refuse. It's got nothing to do with that, but it's got everything to do with how you were socialized to view black people by influences of colonialism and the apartheid regime itself, and being taught that you are just above black people, right? It's got everything to do with that and absolutely nothing to do with religion. And I refuse for religion to be brought into this narrative. And so I've been very vocal. There was even one NGO, but I won't mention their name. One NGO of a Indian Muslim stalwart where I spoke at one of their events after the stalwart passed away, right? Very iconic stalwart. Absolutely,
I know exactly who you speak about.
Yes,
please carry on.
Absolutely adore him. I spoke at one of the events his foundation hosted, and I said, if you want to be very straight and clear with the mission against racism, and you want to fight racism, you can't just do the work with white people. This is a cancer that has found its way into Indian communities as well. So it's very important that we have the conversation in Indian areas. You need to go to your Chatsworth, go to Lodium, go to Lenasia. Make sure that your outreach programs reach those areas. Phoenix, it goes on with the areas because there's a lot of racism there and a lot of ill treatment of black people that are in the area either as domestic workers or are either working with them in shops or whatever the reason is, or just black people who happen to live in the area. There's a lot of ill treatment that they experience. And like you're saying, there's a lot of mixed race children born from marriages, unions, relationships where Indian men had relationships with black women. And there's been a lot that isn't spoken about enough, which those children have experienced at the hands of their paternal family members. So there needs to be a conversation with not just white people, but Indian people as well when we want to talk about racism in this country. And it's something I've been very vocal about based on my experience that there's a lot of racism within Indian communities. My father took me out of the first madrasa I went to as a child, which was in Lodium, which is in Pretoria because I grew up in Pretoria. So Lodium is in Pretoria West. It's an Indian community. Certain sides of it are colored Muslim areas, but mainly Indian. And the madrasa I was going to there, where I started learning the Arabic, you start learning the letters, then you start learning putting the letters together and you start to learn the different du'as and surahs, and then you go on to reading the Quran bit by bit. The madrasa I was in, I used to get hit each time I made a mistake, but no one else in my class was being hit at all. I would get hit with a ruler on my fingers here. As a child that was 4, 5, 6, I was getting hit with a ruler on my fingers here. And I was the only one getting hit like that. No one else in my class. And mind you, I was in a class of just Indian kids only. They could do the wildest things ever, screaming or crying, refusing to cooperate or refusing, perhaps cooperate is the wrong word, but refusing to be well behaved in the class. Nothing would happen. I was the one that got hit when I made a mistake. And then I was taken out because I told my dad, I'm being hit and no one else is being hit. And I told my dad, look, man, this is because my dad and I had very tough conversations with each other. And I said to him, you can love me. I can be your child. Everyone can know I'm your child. But at the end of the day, systems don't view us the same way. You and I are a totally different thing in the eyes of either the white man or a system that is influenced by colonialism or the apartheid regime. We're a totally different thing. When you send me out into an Indian community, No one cares about your rank in society.
Yeah.
They care about the fact that you and I are not the same thing. We had conversations like that, and I told him, the reason why I'm getting hit, it's got nothing to do with who you are in the mosque, how much respect people have for you in the community. It's got everything to do with the fact that you and I look different. And I am seen as more inferior than everyone else. That is why I get hit. And then he took me out and I started having my madrasa lessons in the house where he could watch what the person was doing as they were teaching me.
Yeah.
Still another issue. Again, I always used to be told one statement, you must be a good Muslim.
Yeah.
You must be a good Muslim. And I started to unpack what do they mean, a good Muslim. And for me, it just felt like racism wrapped in a pretty bow. You're not saying it directly, so now you're going to find an indirect way to tell me, and you're going to say you must be a good Muslim.
I think they say that. Look, I don't have a dog in this fight. I think they say that to everyone to try and get them to behave, because they say the same with good Christians, etc. Do you think there's unspoken toxicity within? Let's not make it about the Muslim community only, but certain religious groups in this country who call themselves conservative, including maybe Jehovah's Witness, certain Christian subsects, where we are conservative, we are a close community, and there are people there being ill-treated, whether they're mixed race or other, because it's like you can't speak out, behave, be good. And it's something that we might have to look into as well, because there might be oppressed people in front of us without us seeing, because they are quiet, because they're sitting in a corner there, because they are covered up. I mean, as a silly example, thinking about it now, the beauty of a Muslim woman being covered in a hijab could be used to abuse her physically, where we'll never see the marks, as an example, and other such things. Do you think we'd need to consider, or must we just leave conservative groups alone?
Look, I mean, they form part of society, and if we want a well-working society that is just and equitable, everyone needs to form part of that. And it's never just about just the Muslims or either just the Christians. Generally, in every religion, you have people who will hide behind in the name of God and who will hide behind the word of religion to oppress other people. And that's something we need to tackle as a society in general. It exists in every religious institution or religious group. Across the board it exists, and that's something we need to tackle. And I don't think it's something we should shy away from, because people use the name of God to harm other people. We've seen it multiple times, how women later come out after they were attending certain church groups, and they come out of having been assaulted or molested by the pastors. So that's something that requires us as a society tackling, that as much as you want to be your religious entity on its own or group, at the end of the day, there's certain perils that you must follow within the society. You must also be in line with, I like talking about the Constitution because I think we've got a great Constitution. Perhaps the fault was in application and understanding along those lines, but I think we've got a great Constitution. And the Bill of Rights, we've got a lot of great supporting documents in South Africa that speak to people having full human rights and access to justice as well. So I think it's a thing where we need to be involved as a society to say, look, you can be your entity on your own individually, but there's certain perils that you must fall in line with.
Do you think, in your experience, do you think Muslim women and Muslim girls have platforms, whether it's within the religion, the mosque, etc.? Do you think they have enough platforms to voice any issues they have?
I think that, number one, my religion is one that has been drawn in an incorrect light because of Western media and saying that Muslim women are oppressed. Muslim women are forced to cover up. It's not forceful covering up. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritties of what a hijab means, but it's not forceful. And Muslim women, that's why I say sometimes I don't speak about my religion with people who have never encountered the Quran. Because if you encounter the word of Allah, as well as what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has said about women, you'll understand women are not oppressed in the Islamic religion. It's people who choose to use the word of God to hide behind that to harm other people.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with the religion itself. And last year I went to Kenya for a annual summit that is hosted by one of the organizations where I sit on the council. It's a big feminist group on the continent where we advocate for social justice as well as access to education and opportunity and employment for African women and girls. And Kenya has got a huge population of Muslims, and I met a couple of Muslim feminists where the one was really drawn to my story, and she told me about a platform that exists where Muslim women are now being vocal about having their own platforms to express themselves and voice their own opinions. And she was telling me about the platform. It was founded by someone who said, look, I've learned about the religion through the lens of men, and I think that it's about time women have a forum of some sort to also share things about the religion where girls have access to learning about the religion through the lens of women as well, which is great. So I do believe they have those platforms. And you also look at the kind of lives Muslim women in the Middle East live.
Yeah.
They are involved in the economy. They have ownership over property, land. So it's not the religion. It's people who choose to use the religion to harm other people.
Do you think Muslim women and girls in South Africa have the platforms?
I've met a number of Muslim women that have the platform. And I've met a number of Muslim women that aren't allowed to speak up because of individuals, either their fathers, either their husbands, or let's say there isn't a patriarchal figure in the household like a father or a husband, and now it's the brother, who are held back and are suppressed because of those individuals. Those are the people we must deal with in our society, not the religion. So I think that I've met a number of Muslim women that have the platform to speak up. It's people that suppress their voices.
There's a great documentary, I think it's produced by Chris Rock. He stars in it as well, called Good Hair. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Oh yeah, I have.
I think it's very important for people to go and check it out if they haven't, because it unpacks the many layers, things like relaxers, etc., and how harmful they've been, perms for men back in the day, hot combs, burning your scalp. Did you ever consider being a hair activist in particular, outside of anti-racism, outside of inclusive identity, and being like, I think this would be pretty dope. I want to be an ambassador for hair. I want to be an ambassador for African hair or different hair and hair products that are good for different types of people. Because you've gone into something bigger, which is beautiful, but you could also have just zoned in and being like, you know what? I just want to be an ambassador for hair because it has a huge ripple effect on so many other things. I think Jamie Oliver fought against McDonald's at some point, and he won a lawsuit around food that is being, it was McDonald's and then also revolutionizing food that is given at cafeterias at schools. Mm-hmm. And he's just a chef, but he's done stuff like that, like health and diet. Have you ever considered being a hair activist? Hacktivist?
No, I haven't. I haven't. And I said this to someone I know who's in the business of hair, that I'm an advocate.
Yeah.
Mine is to advocate, educate, and empower. That is the core of my work. And I have always viewed the subject around hair and hair itself as a symptom in the greater diagnosis of systemic racism. Sure. Because when you look at why Black people, colored people have faced any form of racial oppression, which has been through hair over the decades in our country and also just in different parts of the world, it's because these systems of racial injustice, whether apartheid, Jim Crow, segregation, needed something tangible to enforce the actual oppression.
Yeah.
And to have those oppressive policies and laws, you need something tangible to make people feel inferior and oppress people. You need to give them a tangible reason as to say, if you are being pushed to the side and it's said that you are inferior, you need a tangible reason behind that. That's how colonialism operated. That's why you had that era where these European men were examining African bodies and were picking out specific things in African bodies. And then you had that department under apartheid that was responsible for the pencil test. It's because hair has been used as a tangible thing to oppress people and enforce oppression. So that's how I've always viewed hair. I've never viewed hair as a standalone issue. I've always viewed it as part of racism, systemic racism, and I wanted to advocate against racism. I never really thought about being within the space of hair or being a hair activist, as you say. I've never thought of that. Don't think that pokes any interest in me as it stands.
Please explain the pencil test for someone who may not know.
So the pencil test was introduced under the apartheid regime, where there was a department responsible for classifying people, and I'm using the word classifying because this was the wording of the regime itself, that was responsible for classifying people into racial groups, whether you were colored or classified as African. And the pencil test was where they stuck a pencil into your hair. If you shook your head and the pencil didn't move, you were classified as black. And if the pencil slipped through, you would be classified as colored. And under the apartheid regime, where you were classified, ultimately determined where you would live, which school your kids would go to, what type of health care you would have access to, and it would ultimately determine your standard of living as a whole.
Yeah. What year was it? So I was signed with an audit firm. Let me not mention the firm because they paid for my school fees, so I appreciate it. I was doing VAC work at some point in varsity while I was still at Rhodes. And it was the last day. I think the CEO of the firm internationally was there for the day. And I was coming in on the last day. I had an afro dread. And I was wearing slops or whatever. I was a student. It was our last day. We're done and we're going to have a braai. For my exit interview, I get asked, there's a partner that's specifically asked to speak to you. And the partner happened to be a black woman. And I was almost honored that she asked to see me because I was like, okay, maybe she, heard about the work I was doing and I impressed her. She calls me in and she's like, I saw you walking across. And I was like, who's that? Does he work here? I'm like, oh, no, I'm a student. It's just VAC work. She's like, yeah, but this is a workspace. And we don't look like this. I'm like, oh, it's a student. We're not seeing any clients today. So she's like, yeah, but there's a certain way you must carry yourself. She's like, even this hair of yours is inappropriate where we work. At the time while I was studying, there was a partner at KPMG, big firm. So this wasn't KPMG, but there was a partner at KPMG. And I told this lady, I'm like, but there's a partner at KPMG who has dreadlocks. And it's one of the things that kids at varsity had been speaking about, that there's this guy with dreads who's a partner, representation. She's like, well, this is not KPMG. We don't do that here. I was trying to, not understand. I was trying to make her understand that I'm a student. This is my expression. I don't think it's a big deal. And then she went and she started telling me about her son studying in the UK. And then she was like, the problem with you Kasi boys is you like being seen. And I remember my heart dropping. So from that point on, I stopped engaging her. I just listened and I agreed and whatever. And I went and I vented to the other students. One of the students decided to say something to HR and they apologized. And I was like, why were you even... From the age of 5, grew up in the suburbs. My mom was a school teacher. I've gone to Model C schools, exposed to white kids. I didn't even feel a need to defend that at that point in time because she'd already classified me as a township boy who was coming to be rowdy, as a black woman. And when you speak about hair, that becomes one of my stories and becomes one of the sad stories of systematic racism and the institutionalized, to a point where some of the ambassadors of these things are going to be your own people telling you that we don't do this here. And you're like, says who? Just because you were successfully colonized and conditioned, you don't have to accept this. And we will liberate you because I think you're in prison. Ma'am, it's okay. You can also wear your hair the way you like.
Yeah.
For the rest of your years from grade 8 in Pretoria Girls High, did you have a good time? Did you feel some type of pressure? Were you always the kid that Zulaikha, are you okay? Can we do this? Can we drink water? Or is it racist? Is the water too white? How was the rest of your years there?
Oh my word. I said this to, he's my brother, like not biological brother, disclaimer, guys. Because you can't just say these things on public platforms. But he's like my brother. I said this to Dr. Sizwe, where I was like, oh my word, I had a horrible time. I can't even, I think about it now and I'm like, little me was so brave and I aspire to that level of bravery for the rest of my life. I do not know what made me put through with emotional torment, psychological torment to that level. I don't know what made me put myself through that. And I matriculated record time. I got a bachelor's pass, matriculated quite well.
Congrats.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was terrible.
Why did you stay? I mean, the little Zulaikha decided to tell her dad, I'm being treated a certain way at madrasa, and why did you decide to stay?
My dad taught me something, and it's something I apply in general in life all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, even now, as a young woman, there are spaces of activism and civil society which you think are so progressive and are filled with men that are vultures and will make you have the most uncomfortable experience. But I choose to remain and stand my ground in those spaces. Yeah. My dad taught me something and said to me, too many times in your life, you've decided to run and you've decided to disappear to make other people feel comfortable. It's about time you stop trying to make other people feel comfortable and focus on you feeling comfortable. So I think I then started to form some audacity around, why should I leave? Why should I leave? Why should I leave? There's no reason to make me leave. And in fact, I even had the nerve to have this audacity and say, in fact, I'm a well-performing pupil. Why should I leave? Yeah. If anyone should be leaving, it's these old white women who you've hopped from school to school, from job to job, where you've gotten at least 5 warnings in your career at this point. You've gotten at least 5 warnings for treating black children a certain way, and now you've hopped from job to job. Why should I leave? If anyone is leaving, it should be them. Why do you even have a career in teaching if this is the human being that you are? You should not be trusted with children, right? You should not be trusted with something as delicate as the young mind, right? And particularly young girls becoming young women shouldn't be trusted with an environment like that. If anyone is leaving, it should be them, not me.
There was a lady I was seeing around those years of your activism, 2016. 17, and she came from a prestigious school. I'm going to mention the school because it was in the papers. Prestigious girls' school in East London called Clarendon. And there's quite a couple of them. There's Collegiate at Gqeberha. There's obviously St. Anne's, St. Mary's. Around those time, a lot of the black girls that had left the schools started speaking out on social media on some of their racist incidents and some of the systemic, I don't know if systemic is the right word, racism in the schools, and hoping that the schools had changed. It makes me wonder, and it makes me scared, and it makes me worried that there's a big chance that a lot of these schools have still not transformed. St. John's is putting in a lot of work, Sizwe Mpofu Walsh's ex-high school. But I know even with the work they're putting in, there are other people that have issues. You guys are being too woke. What's this nonsense that you're doing? Let's stick to tradition. This is what made our school great. And that's why I was saying even the word inclusive today becomes a polarizing word where it shouldn't be. Representation becomes a polarizing word. Why must we hire this woman? Oh, she's probably appointed here because she's black and they're going to probably make her head of transformation. And a lot of these things are happening, and I almost feel like mainstream society, by mainstream I'm talking about the majority in this country, I'm maybe not aware of these things that are happening. Around those years, I remember having a conversation with my mom. My mom's been in education for over 40 years now. My brother had started teaching. He taught in townships. He taught in Model C schools. He taught at prestigious private schools as well. And I remember when this came out, their thing was, but this is not a... Their thing was, I have to protect them because they're my family. They were like, this is not racism. My mom said in townships, her upbringing, where she taught, black girls were not allowed to have afros. To a point where there are township schools today where black girls are forced by the school code of conduct to keep short hair. No earrings.
I want to say something.
No nails. Sure, go for it.
You know, when you say that, I used to have this argument. With my mom at some point, you know, before she became woke, right? If I could use that word.
She was a part of your upbringing as well. Because I know we didn't speak about her, but
yes.
we'll speak about it next time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I used to have this argument with her where hers was centered around half the privileges you have right now. I never had under Bantu education, right? And she'd say, I used to have a brush cut under Bantu education. And I used to ask her, okay, who introduced Bantu education?
Yeah.
Who introduced it? Because you're saying you went to school in the township in this period. Township schools were under Bantu education. To date, are still being influenced by that system.
Yeah.
Also, the lack of service delivery for township schools, as well as the lack of resources, is as a result of Bantu education.
Mm.
So you have to also ask yourself, who introduced Bantu education?
Yeah.
And that's where you get your answers. And that answer will lead you back to one common problem.
Sure. Do you ever feel pressure to keep your hair? Do you ever feel like, have you ever felt like cutting your hair?
No, I love my hair. I do my hair, and each time I wash my hair, I will pull one strand out and I'll look at it and say, oh, it's this long now. I love my hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Willow Smith, the daughter of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, released a super, I don't know how you put it, like it was a super hit, Whip My Hair. You know, it had a lot of black girls enjoying and celebrating their hair. And one of the stories that came out on the red table with Jada Pinkett was Willow Smith, as young as she was enjoying the fame. And then at some point, she was like, I'm tired of this hair. Can we stop? And her parents were like, no, but this is your signature. This is your thing. And as a form of activism, defiance, she cut her hair off without telling them. There's a lot of loaded conversations that are very complex among black girls in particular around why do you wear a wig? You're colonized. Why do you use skin lightening? Then others will be like, but it's my expression. It's like, but your expression comes from somewhere. You were conditioned. And it's the conversations are around who decides what I get to look like and what's right and what's wrong, and that I'm oppressed and that you're not, to a point where you're like, I'm keeping my hair because I like it. Like, it's not because you like it. It's because you're constantly trying to be an activist, and it puts pressure on you because if you cut it, people be like, but you've sold out. Why did you cut your hair? Do you engage with women? No. Do you think women are making progress in these conversations in finding self and loving self? We had India Ari, we've had Alicia Keys have no makeup. Do you think women are actually really finding themselves, or are we still in a situation where women are actually still slaves to marketing, conditioning, and they aren't even aware of it?
Look, I mean, we are making progress where women are finding themselves, are taking more ownership over their autonomy in terms of how they express themselves.
Yeah.
Black women particularly are having a stronger voice in terms of how they choose to physically express themselves. We are making progress, but then we come back and we go in circles at times, right? And this is the thing, you may decide to hate me or not after I say this, but we go in circles because of other women sometimes, where the influences are coming from other women in terms of you are desirable when you have a wig on, the lace frontal wig, you're desirable when you're wearing that, or you're desirable when you have makeup on. I've had other women even question me sometimes in certain I think I once encountered a woman once who said to me, Zulaikha, once in a while, a little bit of makeup just to also be a little bit appropriate. And I asked her, appropriate for who? Because I'm comfortable in my skin and I'm happy to show up at engagements with my bare face. I'm happy to, right? So I think that women, we can be each other's enemy of progress, because not too long ago I saw a video that was shared with me. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know what really goes on there. But someone who knows me shared a video with me that was on TikTok and said to me, look, they're mentioning your name here and they're talking about you. They're referencing you. And I went and I watched the video because she was like, this person is referencing you. And I remember this person was basically talking about how I'm not sure if it's a social media influencer or someone who is popular on social media said that women are only desirable or can only sit at her table, something along those lines, can only sit at their table when they're wearing a wig, right? And that for me is how women become each other's enemy of progress, and how we keep on circling back to the same thing where it's like 1 minute we are moving in the right direction, then we circle back to where we were because of other women. It's those types of influences where just because you want to wear a wig, now you feel the need to enforce that on everyone around you and make everyone else who doesn't want to wear a wig not desirable enough.
Sure.
So that for me, I think we really need to work on that as women, because we're a lot of the times, and it's gets so tiring because people don't want to have this conversation. A lot of the times we're each other's enemies of progress. It's other women telling other women, you need to put makeup on, or you need to wear a wig, or you need to relax or straighten your hair, or whatever it may be. It's other women telling other women. It's not men. It's not a certain tabloid or a certain media outlet. It's other women.
Any closing comments? I'm going to need you to commit to come back. This time was too short. I've got so many other things to unpack. I want to speak about the work you're doing. I want to speak about your studies. I want to speak about the different layers of schooling, some of the guidelines that may or may not have changed. I want to speak about, we speak about hair as just one concept of colonization, etc. I want to speak about language. You and I are speaking English as well. You may be free now to wear your hair a certain way, but then there were things like trigger words in the article of, in certain schools, you're not allowed to speak certain languages on the premises. And that's going to take a much longer time. So I'm really hoping, if you have time for me, we can sit for 1.5, 2 hours and unpack. But I'd like any closing thoughts and comments or anything you just want to get off your chest.
Currently, I think I've been saying the same thing. I think the upcoming election is the second most important election in this country's history. Yeah. It's just as important as the election of 1994. We need people to go to the polls and vote, and we need young people under the age of 35 to go to the polls and make their mark. That's really my closing comments. And I'm saying this because I know there's so many young people that are subscribers to your channel, that are part of your audience. It's so critical. We have to.
Who must they vote for?
I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. You must sit with yourself. You must analyze and be critical, looking at your country having come 30 years into democracy. And you must look at the country and the state of how people are living. Where are we in terms of, have the remnants of the system that oppressed Black people completely been annihilated? Yeah. What is the standard of living for majority of this country? You released statistics not so long ago around the average salaries people in this country are earning. So many people in this country, a large majority of the people in this country, based on the stats you released not so long ago on Twitter, are earning below a minimum living wage, where based on inflation, that money can't even sustain them, right? You need to look at things like that and sit by yourself, because any man-made crisis has got a man-made solution. Yeah. It's a matter of do people want to fix the problem, or is it convenient enough, and does it benefit certain individuals to have certain social injustices exist and continue to be sustained? Because oppression must be looked at as a man-made machine that has drivers who continue to drive the engine and sustain it over time, and it's a machine of its own, which it's possible to destroy the machine. It's a matter of, does it work for people? Does it not? Is it convenient for a certain minority of people? So I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but you have to vote.
Yeah.
It's not a choice to say you're not going to vote or participate. Now, especially, I think now the country is in desperate need of a young person's vote.
Zulaikha Patel, honored again to have met you. Very excited by your voice, your activism, and I hope we can unpack much more these conversations, particularly for women and young girls. And we need more Zulaikha Patels out there to know that it's possible and also to know that it's safe. You had a horrible experience, you say, at school. I know many other girls doing the same for speaking up. And we need to find ways to protect those girls, to be like, you can speak up, it's fine. There are safe spaces where if you're feeling some type of way, we'll make sure that you're okay. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for fighting for specifically young black girls to be comfortable in their own skin, in their own hair, in the spaces that they spend most of their time in. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.